I'd like to take you back for a moment in time to 1975. 1975. I was 15 years old and I was playing in the US Open in Lincoln, Nebraska, all the way from Seattle, Washington. And there were chess grandmasters. Ooh. In Seattle, we didn't have a lot of chess grandmasters. So it's like really exciting to be around these players and to watch their games. And 1975 was a kind of a very special period in time. We were still in the afterglow, if you will, of the Bobby Fischer-Boris Spassky match. Bobby Fischer, you know, was scheduled in that year to defend his title. It was after the Nixon affair, the Watergate affair. There was a time. It was a time of Bruce Lee and the martial arts were exploding on the field. It was also an interesting time for computers. Computers were becoming more in the human consciousness. They weren't just for geeks and national security, but computers. They were going to become household items. And in 1975, when I was playing at the US Open, several conversations really were the topic. The first one was, would computers ever be able to compete against the world's best players? And if the answer was no, then why? And if the answer was yes, then in what other field couldn't the computer compete? If they could compete with us in chess, couldn't they compete with us in poetry or in story making or any topic? And so these were heavily debated issues. Would the computer ever beat a world champion? The second topic of conversation that was linked to the computer was if the computers became the world champions or the best in the world, what openings would they choose? And why would they choose those openings? And would openings be solved in the sense that there was always going to be an only and best move, if you will? So these were very, very heated discussions. And the reason why the opening discussion in particular became so very heated was this idea that in chess you have a wide variety of openings. And you see these grandmasters, you see some openings. For example, at one time, we'll have to go back maybe 10 years or less, it was everybody, it just seemed like the strongest positional players, the strongest dynamic players, it just seemed to me like everybody was playing the Sveshnikov Sicilian. It was like, man, it just exploded. And it became super popular. And today, there's like maybe 1/10, 1/50th of the games are a Sveshnikov Sicilian. There was a time during the Karpov era when everybody, and I mean everybody and his brother, would play not knight c3 allowing the Nimzo Indian, but rather knight f3, and black was playing Queen's Indian. Like Anatoly Karpov was leading the charge, and the Queen's Indian became it. Yeah, the Queen's Indian. Everybody was playing the black side of the Queen's Indian. And so forth and so on. It's sort of like openings and defenses fall into fashion, and greatly so, and they fall out of fashion, and once again, greatly so. In 1975, I was watching the games of a grandmaster by the name of Arthur Bisguier. And Arthur Bisguier, yes I am. Yes, he played in many, many, many US championships, many, many US Opens, and there was Arthur Bisguier on his board, the Grandmaster Arthur Bisguier, And virtually every round, he was playing the Berlin defense. The Berlin defense, right? So here we were having all of these heated discussions about openings and defenses, and then we were thinking, wow, at the turn of the millennia, in the year 2000, what would be the most popular openings and defenses? Here we are, 25 years from now, what would we predict would be the most popular? Maybe it was decided that E4 was unplayable, or D4 was unplayable. Maybe the openings of tomorrow would be the orangutan, or maybe something like the Grab attack, playing on the flanks, accelerated Grab attack type of things. None of us, none of us thought that the Berlin defense would become the most popular defense of the 21st century. Because there would be Arthur Visquire, a man ahead of his time, right? Because he had been playing the Berlin defense like somebody taught Arthur. We would joke that somebody taught Arthur the Berlin defense when he was 5, and that was all he learned, because that was his opening. And I asked Arthur, I quizzed him deeply about the Berlin defense and why he liked it. And he explained to me, and I think he did a very good job in hindsight, that the Berlin defense was one of those defenses from black that allowed for 3 results. Okay? So what he was basically trying to say, and I understood what he meant to say, was that when you're black and you play, for example, something like a classical Ruy Lopez, and you play, for example, a Breyer defense, that normally speaking, white has an advantage of sorts, whether slight or what have you, that's long-lasting. If you play a Marshall Gambit, more than likely, the game's going to be a draw. And if white wants a draw against the Marshall Gambit, he can definitely choose a variation that's drawn. Conversely, in Arthur's view, the Berlin defense created an imbalance, which it does, which allowed for all 3 results. And today, it's like every grandmaster in the world has the Berlin defense in his repertoire. Magnus Carlsen, world champion; Viswanathan Anand, 5-time world champion; Hikaru Nakamura, Wesley So, the 2 highest rated players in the United States. Just go down a list. A very, very dynamic player, for example, Veselin Topalov, who plays Sicilians. Sicilian Najdorf is a favorite of Veselin. He plays the Berlin defense. Okay. So the topic of the conversation tonight, topic of the lecture tonight, was this idea of, first of all, let's try to understand the Berlin, what it is that all of these top grandmasters are finding attractive. And then the other interesting thing about the Berlin defense is what I was explaining, how openings and defenses go through these periods of fashion where they become ultra popular and then disappear. The Berlin defense really burst into our consciousness during the 2000 World Chess Championship match between Garry Kasparov and Vladimir Kramnik. And Garry Kasparov, as we all know, was doing terrible things as the world champion. He was just like beating everybody and beating them very, very badly. It was considered that Vladimir Kramnik was not Gary's match, but then on the other hand, who was? You had to play somebody. And so Vladimir Kramnik got his opportunity, and Vladimir had a real problem. What was he going to do against Gary's E4? So the Berlin defense, knight f6, has a very, very long history, because if you think about it from this position, what could be more natural than, knight f6, developing a piece. Okay. If white is prompted to play a move like d2, d3, responding to the threat of knight takes e4, well, then this whole setting up the central pawn duo with c3, d4 has been delayed by a tempo, and it's considered that black should be happy that he's cost white a tempo in his plan. Okay, so by far the most challenging move is castles. And Vladimir Kramnik asked the simple question, what are you going to do if I take your pawn? Knight takes e4. Okay. So again, there are several moves. At rook e1, knight d6, going back, attacking the bishop on b5. Knight takes e5, knight takes e5, rook takes e5 check. Bishop e7 has been played numerous times at the highest, most elite level. But if you look at the pawn structure, you go, geez, this is the most symmetrical pawn structure in the world, and it's going to be very, very hard for the first player to prove an advantage, which practice has shown to be the case. Not to say that white doesn't win some of those games, but really black has an easy, easy time. So by far the most challenging is the move d2, d4, and basically this has been known for decades. And it was known by Vladimir Kramnik as he was preparing for Garry Kasparov. And Vladimir needed a particular type of opening defense that he wanted against Garry. He wanted queens off the board, because Garry was such a dynamic attacking player. If he could just start by trading queens at the very start of the game, he takes away a lot of Garry's firepower. So this one fit the bill. Not only did he trade it after the forcing moves takes, white wins back his pawn. Not only has Vladimir traded off the queens literally right away, but he's also taken off a bishop. White has lost the light-squared bishop for a knight. Two deficits in the position for black. First, black has lost the right to castle. Maybe not the worst thing ever. Secondly, black does have these double pawns. Okay, those are the two deficits that black has. Conversely, white's extra pawn on the king side, this majority is really hard for white to exploit. On a really good day, white is going to try to play for f4 and g4 and f5 and put his majority to work. From black's point of view, he needs to solve his development. Where is he going to put this bishop? Bishop here, bishop here. He needs to solve the question of his king. Normally speaking, in the old days, that got sorted right away. White often played the move rook d1 check, king e8, and away you go. In other words, in the days of Arthur Bisguier, when the players reached this position, this move, rook d1 check, king e8 were automatics. Play continued from this point. Practice, however, has shown, in a very strange way, I would pose a question to white. After you've played the move rook d1, could you please explain to me the role of your rook on a1? Where is that guy going? When are you going to bring that rook on a1 into the game? Maybe only after you develop your knight and your bishop, you'll figure out maybe to move the rook back to e1 to open up the rook coming to d1. So over the course of time, the move rook d1 was delayed. And white began to think, well, maybe I should bring my knight to c3, which makes very, very logical sense. Then maybe I'll bring my bishop, I don't know, maybe to f4, maybe to g5. I'll put this rook on d1 and this rook on e1 for check. So knight c3 became all the rage. And it's strange how chess develops, the thinking of chess develops over time. So for example, Black said, okay, well, I'm going to solve the issue of my king. I'll just move my bishop out. I'll move my bishop to say, I don't know, d7. Okay, so what would you do? Let's say you would give me a check. Very, very logical. Check to my king. I will move my king to the king side. Queen side, I beg your pardon. You would move your rook, for example, to d1. And I would say, I don't know, but okay, I'll just make Luft for my king, b7, b6. And now White would start thinking, okay, White would start to think, what should I do next? What should I do? I've done everything. Oh, I know. I could bring this guy into the game. I could play rook to e1 and leave it up to Black to decide what he wants to do. Black says, well, I know what I want to do. I'll play bishop b4, and I'll get into bishops of opposite colors. So that my next turn, I'll take this knight. You'll recapture my bishop. My bishop will go to e6, and I'll be perfectly safe. Okay. So White starts thinking, saying, gosh, I can see what you, Black, want to do. Oh, I know. I'll play g2, g4. I'll drive your knight back. Maybe after g4, you won't be so anxious to go to h6, or you won't be, if you go to e7, then you've got to solve something. I know, I'll play g4. You'll go back to e7, not to h6. I'll take, you'll take, and I'll play h3. And I've got this really great idea. Yes, sir?
Before the variation where you played rook f to e1,
yes.
Could you play g2 to g4 before that?
Exactly, we could. We could play g2, g4 in this moment as well. Okay, and we'll come back to this in just a second. Whoops. Okay, just a second. We'll get here, and we're going to play h2, h3. Okay, we're going to go h2, h3. So White has this great dream. What White wants to do is go knight to d4, f2, f4, bring his knight into the center and push his pawns, and suddenly there's this very annoying move, h7, h5. You don't want to really take on h5, and you don't want Black trading and taking on g4. What are you going to do, Julian? Maybe e6 right now, e5, e6. And let's say, well, Black has to capture that fella. Yeah, knight d4. And you might say that at the end of this whole series of trades, I don't know, something like that. Well, maybe we'll just take this guy instead. Black plays, I don't know, say bishop here. You're going to take. And you know, before you know it, Black's ending up getting counterplay. He's going to play rook to h3. He's going to double his rooks. Maybe he can harass this g-pawn sometimes with rook h4. And boom, the game gets really simplified. Let's go back for a moment to this moment before rook fe1, and we'll just take a quick look at g4. g4, the knight drops back as we've previously seen, knight to e7, and you got an issue. How are you going to defend this pawn on g4? Well, the very obvious move is h2, h3. Black once again does the very same thing, h7, h5. Darn it! Now this early g4 has created an opportunity that didn't exist for black to make counterplay against g4. Okay? So, oops. How should white deal with this one? Should he play rook d4? Isn't that encouraging, perhaps, c5? Should he play knight h2? Well, knight h2 doesn't impress on many counts. After, for example, takes, rook takes h2 isn't necessarily immediately worrisome, but let's say black played a move like knight d5. He blunders a pawn. There's something a little bit scary here for white, that white might feel a little bit uncomfortable about, that this rook might one day, and on a very bad day and at that, land on the square h1. So after, for example, a position like this, there might be issues with f6 takes, bishop d6 and takes, and suddenly it's black who has the initiative. So we go back to how chess theory evolved, and the remarkable thing was white, the most popular move here for white became h2, h3. So what white started to do is realize for him that if he's ever going to get his kingside going, just to put a position on the board for a moment, bishop to d7, g4, knight back to e7, king g2, h5, king g3. He's going to want to be able to protect the pawn on g4, oftentimes with his king. Okay. But when you get to such positions, you have to be very careful that you simply haven't helped black develop his rook that hasn't moved. Okay. So the Berlin defense today, right now, has become one of the most popular defenses to e4 from everybody. From everybody at the top plays the Berlin. And the Berlin defense not only decided the outcome of the 2000 World Chess Championship match, but also the 2014 World Chess Championship match, as it was the final game, Game 11, Magnus Carlsen White, Vichy Anand Black, a lecture I had made earlier in the week about that decided the outcome of the match. Okay. When you're black at the highest levels, and even at the amateur levels, the choice of defense is a really, really tough one. Sometimes you want to play a sharp, I don't know, Sicilian. Sometimes you want to play a solid, I don't know, Caro-Kann or French defense. Suddenly with the Berlin, you're getting everything at once. You're getting an imbalanced position that gives you chances to win as black, as well as a solid position that's really, really hard for the first player to break down. So here I am, the year 2015, saying, you guys should learn to play like Arthur Bisguier from 1975. He wrote the book on the Berlin defense, and he inadvertently pioneered the way. So lectures, I think, should be interactive, and I'm going to invite yourselves to play against me, and we'll logically go through the whys of the moves that you've chosen and why I feel that black should go with the flow. Okay, so leaving it out to yourselves, You could play, you can bring your knight out, you could start your advance over here, you could, I don't know, maybe do something else. And this is the position that the grandmasters, the top grandmasters, can't make heads or tails of. They can't make up their minds whether it's h3, knight c3, b3, rook d1 check. It's very frustrating for them. And then they leave their chess engines on too. I mean, they put this position in their chess engines and let it think a week. Then they come back and the thing's going 0, 0, 3, 0, 0, 5, still undecided. So let's take a crack. Who would like to play white's move here? Knight g5. Okay. You don't get two. Okay, so knight g5. Okay, this is a very logical looking move. Because on the one hand, if after all of this conversation that I've been having about how important it is, or imperative, or what have you, to be able to move your pawn forwards, then you got to get your knight out of the way. And what could be sweeter than moving your knight with a gain of tempo, because you're threatening my pawn on f7. I don't want to play this move. I don't want to play this move because after this move, first of all, you can now recapture, and I don't even have the benefit of the two bishops. Okay, so long term, I think white is just going to torture black for a long time, even though, again, a lot of games have been drawn from these types of setups. I will instead defend, I'm going to defend my f7 pawn by moving my king. At the moment, you might think to yourself, well, that was a good trade of moves, but in truth, my king on d8 is actually misplaced. I want to bring a rook to the open file, so I know my king on d8 is going to move, whether voluntarily or not. Your turn. What would be your follow-up to knight to g5? Rook David 1. Okay. So now, after Rook David 1, I'm thinking that that was actually a good move by yourselves. I was actually hoping that you wouldn't notice, but your knight on f3 defended the d4 square. I was hoping you would play some passive move, for example, like knight c3. So I was hoping that I'd be able to bring my knight. Let me just put this move on the board. I'll play a bad move for white. Forgive me. Play a bad move for white. I put my knight on this wonderful square d4. I'd be attacking this pawn on c2. I'd give myself opportunities for knight e2 check. And if you did something, well, it's already bad. But, well, let's just say this is wonderful. Black is suddenly, attacking with a lone knight. White's in trouble. So rook d1 stopped me very cleverly from rerouting my knight to a nice square. But after you've played knight f3 to g5, I'm going to play the move h7, h6. I'm going to simply kick your knight back. Your knight has two choices. It can go to e4 or f3. I'm going to just pick one. I'm going to pick e4 as the more favorable choice, let us say, because otherwise, why did you play knight f3 to g5, right? You just gave me the extra move h7, h6. I'll pull my bishop out, bishop to e6. So I've got a good square now for my bishop. I'm assuming, for example, that you might want to develop your knight, and I'll develop my bishop. So you've got your knight to e4. You've got your knight to c3. They're kind of on each other's hooves, so to speak, at the moment. So they're duplicating one another. I'm hoping that you will play a poor move. I'm hoping for this move g4. You usually, if It's not well prepared. It's simply a bad move. Now you're chasing my knight to a very attractive square, and you're putting your pawn on prise. So I'm already, trust me on this one, I'm already more than satisfied with the outcome of the position for black. Even though you haven't made any moves, I prefer black's position. It's like, so you played natural, good-looking moves, and already, just like that, you've got a disadvantage. Okay, well, try again. Another choice. Oops, not another one. Julian. Knight to c3. Okay. So here I've got, you gave me an option that if you had played rook d1 check, I'm moving my king. Yeah. You played knight c3, so you've given me an option of either forcing my king to e8, or like now, giving me the option of going queenside. I'm going to try to exploit you. Okay, I'm going to go queenside with the move bishop to d7. My intention is to play king c8. Again, Julian. b2, b3? Yeah, okay, b2, b3. I think this is like one of the hardships for the white player in the Berlin. It's not always clear what the best square, darn it, is for the bishop. I mean, f4 is a nice square, no question about it. f4 is a nice square. But then in a certain sense, doesn't the bishop stand in front of the pawn? g5 is a nice square. Well, first of all, it's a check, but then won't that encourage black to play h6? You put your bishop on d2, it's kind of passive. When you fianchetto the bishop, you're looking for an exciting opportunity to play e5, e6. Okay, I'm going to step aside, king c8. Let me just follow up for a moment for white. Bishop b2. And let me see. Now I have to go into a think and decide what I want to do. It's not always so clear to me what it is I want to do with black in such situations. Let me play a natural move for a moment. I'm going to try this move, h7, h6. Okay? So what my idea of h6 is I want to stop knight g5. I want to give my bishop a useful square on e6. Okay, your turn. Rook d1, rook e1, knight e4. Where do you want to go? What do you want to do? Rook a d1, very natural move. I'm going to play b7, b6. Okay, so finally, I'm not quite there yet, but I have idea to play c5 and bishop c6 and king b7. I want to put my bishop on this diagonal. All right, your turn. Help him out, people. Help him out. It's you. It's me versus the world. I got the whole world lined up against me. h2, h3. Okay, I like this move. It's very common to preparing the move g4. Okay. Now, let's say that I'm no longer satisfied with my knight on f5. I'm going to reroute my knight. I'm going to play knight e7 with a very specific idea that on either g6, where it could come to f4, or if you prematurely move your knight to e4, I want to take up residence on d5. Yes, Julian? Knight David 4. Wow. Okay. Humana. Knight David 4. I usually don't see that in these types this moment. Okay, I'll attack the knight. Oh, you're sacrificing. Yay. Well, now you've gone back. Okay. Yeah, but I've normally speaking, I gloriously get to stick my bishop. Just a second. Let me just put it. I get to stick my glorious bishop here, not usually when I'm a pawn up. Knight to g6. Rook Edgar 1. Yay. Okay, so I want to prepare bishop to d6. I will play rook to g8. Why do I play rook to g8? I just want to refortify this pawn on g7. I could have played bishop e7. Hold it, sorry. Let me say. I could have played bishop e7 a moment ago, but I'm hoping that when you play knight e5, I'll trade and I'll get a tempo. I want to have my cake and eat it too, in other words. Okay. So very interesting. What white has done is he's sacrificed a pawn to try to refute my position. And what white is about to discover is actually I've got a pretty solid position. It's really going to be hard to refute. Okay, we're going to go back. No worries. It's a try. It's a try. It's just a try. What we're doing right now together, you and I, is exactly what chess grandmasters do all over the world. Whether they're preparing for the World Chess Championship or the State Championship or the Bundesliga, they sit down with one another and play devil's advocate against the other. Usually they have their chess engines working overtime as well, right beside them as well. But this is what they do, and they come to conclusions, and if they discover a new idea that hadn't previously been played, well, then they're super excited. Okay, we'll take another, and we've just got a few minutes before the Blitz tournament begins. Matthew, what line, have you played this line as white yourself? Yes. And in this position, what's your favorite turn? You've come around to the move h2, h3 as well. Okay, very exciting. Very exciting indeed. Let me take a different approach against h2, h3 than I've previously, just to mix it up for a moment. Let me play knight e7. Normally speaking, the reason I voluntarily retreat because I feel like I've gained something. Yes, I've gained something. I provoked you to play h2, h3, and I never really liked the square e7. My dream square actually is the e6 square. So I have ideas on a very good day of playing knight g6, knight f8, knight e6. There, I think I'll be blockading your majority. So the fact that I've managed to gain h2, h3, makes me super confident. I give myself a pat on the back, But h2, h3 is the main move. And now, knight c3. Okay. For me, it's kind of easy in the sense I know I'm going to have to move my king, so I'll play the move king e8 rather than worry about should I play h6, should I play h5, should I play b6, should I play a5, a4. All of those other moves I can choose later. It's a real jungle out there, and I have to decide what I'm going to do. But king e8 is one of those moves that's always useful. So I'm going to play king e8. Rook Edgar 1. Oh, okay. So you're giving me an opportunity that I normally don't get. Okay, well, I'll try to take advantage of you. I'll exploit your move order if I can. I'll go knight d5. Okay, so I'm hoping that you'll trade and help undouble my pawns, and I'm a happy camper. Okay, so knight to d5. Your turn. Knight e4. You're not a nice person. Nobody told you you were a nice person. I had this great plan, and you double-crossed me. Okay, but knight e4, aren't you provoking? Yes, you are. Knight to b4. So, in the immortal words of my trainer, Nikolai Minev, gift me your pawn. Gift me your pawn. Rook e2. Okay, so now rook e2. Okay, I believe in development. The bishop is coming out to f5. So I have a cruel intention of knight c2, and in case of rook c2, bishop e4. Or simply bishop e4, knight c2. In the other case, I want to gift me your pawn. Knight David 4. Oh boy, now things are really getting complicated. Oh my goodness. Oh boy. Okay, so let's boldly analyze the obvious for a moment. Bishop takes, rook takes. I believe in development. Rook to d8. So my cruel intention is rook d4 and knight c2. Not, but no, c3 is an excellent move. c3 defends the knight, attacks my knight. Bad people. I'll drop in on you. I'll go knight d3. So on a good, yeah, bishop g5. That's a nice tempo. I like bishop g5. I'm going to play rook d5.
Was it too early to push the pawn right before that?
No, 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 no. The e6 is also on the agenda. We'll go back in a second. That's a very reasonable looking move as well. So at this moment, things have heated up. I don't know what's what at the moment, but I have ideas of knight takes b2. I have ideas, good or bad, of rook takes e5. And finally, sometimes it's very useful for black to get in a tempo move h6. That helps me contain, compress, withhold your kingside majority. Okay, your turn. Rook d1. Holy cow, is it my birthday? Yeah. Rook d1. Okay, I don't know, but I love grabbing pawns. Oh, yes. So, alert, alert. Check this out. My knight is hanging. Okay, so now I start analyzing. I start thinking, okay, if I go bishop a3, maybe you'll play bishop c1, maybe you'll play knight c2. I'll give a check, takes, takes. Knight takes, knight takes. I got two pawns, but wait a minute, I don't like that. I'm going to have to retreat my knight. So, knight c4. Take a pawn. Take a pawn. Oops. That's about the worst mouse slip you can make in a tournament game. Don't do this at home, folks. Override. Let's just say, where are we? There we go. So you take a pawn. I take a pawn. You give me check. I go here. You give me hockey mat. Okay, that's good to know. So I've got to do something very clever to avoid getting mated. And it doesn't look like I've got anything super clever on my... I was hoping that c5 would, but no, the knight on c6 still holds on. So in this position, we go back to this position, that line of checkmate, I need to play h6. I've got to validate is the sacrifice of the pawn a good or not. So rook b2, rook takes b2, h takes g5, rook takes b7. Let's say king comes out to d7. And we got another very, very typical ending. One of the things that black oftentimes aspires to is with the pawn on e5, if I can get, on a very good day, a position where my king would be nicely on e6, I would have an opportunity of gaining an edge. At this moment, I don't know who's better. Maybe after rook b8, I'm in this very annoying pin. Maybe that's very good for you. Maybe rook takes a7. You've won a pawn at the moment. Maybe you're satisfied with that. Julian. Just a second. Let me check my rule book. Yes. What's g4? Can't I take that with either?
Well, if you take with the h pawn, I'm going to play c5.
And checkmate me brilliantly on the first turn. But at the moment, I'm 2 pawns up, right? And in case of check, I have the outstanding retreat. And even that's not 100% clear. But again, this is exactly, again, how grandmasters choose their openings. And I think that just this little demonstration that we've had with ourselves goes to show it's not easy. It's not easy finding the right way, whether you're white, because of the flexibility of the positions. So again, I just want to encourage you. You've got a classical defense. All 3 results are possible. It's really, really cool defense. The Berlin is the 21st century opening.